This week, T takes on the metal on wood gate that closes automatically. So here's where the gate is going to be. We just had all this concrete poured down to the fence line back there. Let's go ahead and get started. For this project, I called on my friend Taylor to help me out since he has experience building his own gate and fence. We started off day one by digging, and more digging. We kept going until we reached the marks on his post hole digger. Day two started with us ready to insert the post into the hole, or so we thought. We had to remove the post and dig even more. Apparently the marks on the post hole digger were off by a few inches.
Yeah, so
3 inches off? We kept digging until we reached our depth of 4 feet down and 6 feet of the 10-foot post was exposed above. We eventually got the post deep enough. However, after we inserted the post, we noticed that it was leaning towards the fence and not level at all. This happened because our hole was slanted a good solid inch. We had to get a shovel and scrape the sides to fix the issue. With the post in, we used scrap 2x4s, stakes, screws, and clamps to serve as support braces. All these will keep the post in place while we pour our concrete around it. I ended up cutting part of the bottom 2x4 to make room for the wheelbarrow, and with everything in place, we were ready to mix and pour concrete. As we were cutting into the cement bags and mixing, we noticed a lovely cloud of cement in the air. We decided to put on our respirators and continue with the concrete pour. Always wear your PPE. In total, we ended up using 6 60-pound bags of cement. We kept filling the hole until there was about a half an inch from the top of the main concrete slab. We then floated the top with a piece of scrap wood. The next step was to find out how wide the gate should be.
you can do whatever you want. The bigger the gate is, the harder that automatic closing thing is going to be. The bigger the gate, the heavier the gate, the more it's going to slam. Yeah. 72 inches.
We marked out the spots for each flange. Taylor then tacked the 2 flanges to a piece of flat bar so there wouldn't be any movement as we drilled into the concrete with a hammer drill.
I mean, I'll stand on it here where I'm drilling, and then you just stand anywhere else on it. Keep it.
We drilled 4 holes for each flange. Taylor then removed the flanges from the flat bar, and then we secured them down to the concrete anchors. This was the conclusion of day 3. Day 4 started by creating an even plane between the post and the smaller vertical 1.5-inch tubing against the house. Using Taylor's laser level, we were able to find the perfect elevation to determine the height of the vertical tubing. With the first vertical tubing cut to length, Taylor was able to tack and weld it securely to the flange. With 2 vertical pieces in place, we took a long piece of 2x4 tubing and laid it across the top of the 2 posts. From here, we were able to mark out the length of the next vertical tubing on the stationary side of the gate. Off camera, we trimmed the vertical tubing to length. I then measured the outside distance between the 2 vertical tubes so that we can cut the horizontal top piece that holds them together. Using an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, we notched out the horizontal piece so that it caps off the vertical pieces when welded. Sorry, no mitered corners here. I then measured the inside length of the 2 vertical pieces and cut another tube to length. With everything cut, all that was left to do was weld it all together.
We'll do the vertical part of the gate here and do the hinges.
Okay.
So it's easy. It'd be easy to do that with just a single piece of tubing,
Right.
rather than trying to deal with the whole thing of the gate. And then we'll just build the gate off of that.
We get started with day 5 by cleaning up the surface on the post in preparation for welding on the hinges. I measured the outer dimensions between the 2 horizontal pieces on the stationary side. This tubing will become the vertical pieces that hinges onto the post. Using 1/2-inch wood spacers, we clamp the said vertical piece to the post. Taylor then tacks on the hinges, and he makes sure to weld the male side on the bottom to the post, while the female side of the hinges go on top attached to the 1.5-inch vertical tube. This will allow me to remove the gate should I ever need to. Next, we get the long top horizontal piece into place. Before welding it, we made sure to once again notch out the ends so that it will cap off the vertical pieces once put together. Here we work on the lockbox for the deadbolt. We figured it'd be much easier to lay things flat on the workbench than to do things standing up at the gate. We made sure to measure 3 feet from the ground for the placement of the lockbox. Back at the gate, we clamped an extra tube to the top with a 3/8 of an inch spacer in between it and the stationary side. This offset is to compensate for any gate sag due to the weight, and also thinking about the weight of the wood pickets towards the end. We then attached the bottom horizontal piece with notches on each end to finish off the frame. Off camera, we drilled a drain hole should any water make its way into the tubes.
Yeah, that's sexy, dude.
After our small moment of celebration, I measure out the heights needed for the vertical braces. As I'm off camera prepping and cutting the flat iron, Taylor completes his welds at all the joints. As Taylor's grinding down his welds, I'm off camera cutting and prepping the surfaces of the flat bar. These bars will be welded evenly to the backside of the 1.5 inch tubing for the frame. In addition to structural support, the flat bar will also be the contact point for me to screw the wooden stretchers to. It will all make sense later on. Here we measure and mark where we want to place the vertical flat bars. We evenly space them out to divide the gate in thirds. While Taylor is tacking the vertical bars, once again I'm off camera cutting and prepping horizontal pieces to go in between each vertical divider. Yes, we could have just overlapped the horizontal bars over the vertical ones, but I wanted everything to be on the same plane. We used a scrap 2x4 and plywood to act as a spacer for the top and bottom horizontal pieces. The reasoning for this is so that I don't split the wooden pickets later on by drilling into the ends of each one. Here is where I tried welding for the first time. I was okay trying it out on this side, as the side of the gate would be hidden by the wooden pickets. Welding is easier than I thought. I can weld for functionality, but I definitely understand why it takes time to really master the craft and have it look really good.
Oh, I missed.
I decided to let Taylor get back to the welding, as he's much better and faster than I am. After all the welds are completed, Taylor and I take to the angle grinders and go to town. For the purpose of this gate, California law states that there can't be more than a 2-inch clearance from the ground to the bottom of the enclosure. Therefore, we need to close the gap. We headed to Taylor's place and I got to see him use his plasma cutter to cut the 6-inch flat bar. Back at my place, we secure the newly cut flat bar to the bottom of the gate with magnets, tack it into place, and finish off the welds. The structural part of the gate is now officially complete. Before calling it for the night, I scrubbed down the entire gate with a Scotch-Brite pad and dish soap. This helps get all the oil off and ready for primer and paint. I began day 6 by applying primer to the frames. I first used a brush to get all the corners and hard to get spots, and then I transitioned to a roller to quickly get the rest of the frame. Although you won't be able to see it, I make sure to also prime the bottoms of the flanges so no bare metal is exposed. To make things a little bit easier, I temporarily set the gate on the cement anchors. This provides a better and much more comfortable posture to prime the rest of the frame. Later that evening, I decided to plane down the pickets to smooth them out. I had originally tried to use a drum sander, but it was taking way too long. With all the pickets planed down and smooth, I take each one to the table saw and rip each side to smooth out the edges. I take off a total of 1/4 inch so that the pickets can closely fit inside the gate frame. I start day 7 by ripping down 2x4s to 3/4 of an inch to act as stretchers for the pickets. Taylor came over to cut off 10 inches from his 2x4 tube, split them in half, and creating 2 C-channels for the mounting brackets for the kant-slam gate closer. Off camera, I cut off the dog ears of each picket. As Taylor's welding on the C-channels, I'm cutting the horizontal wood stretchers to length, and then I'm screwing them onto the flat bars. Upon completion of the welded C-channels, Taylor noticed the primer rubbing off the hinges. The vertical tube was rubbing against the hinges as the gate opened. To correct this, we easily took off the gate, ground down the hinges for more clearance, and once that was done, it was easy to put the gate back in place. Day 8 began with me removing the stationary side of the gate. I purchased 3/8 stainless steel washers to go underneath each flange. That way, should any water get inside the tubes, it could drain out and not get trapped inside each flange. With the stationary side in place, I can now focus on the latch for the gate. For my purpose, California code states that the latch must be at least 62 inches off the ground. I just placed it in the top left corner of the gate. Here, I weld on the catch and bar for the latch without any help. I tack on the catch by filling in the screw holes and then finish welding around the perimeter of the latch. I do the same thing for the bar on the gate and clean up my welds with an angle grinder. Next, it's time for the kant-slam gate closers. I trace an outline of the hinges, take off the gate, and clean up the area on the post. I hold the hinges in place with a clamp, tack them into place in the screw holes, and weld around the perimeter. I repeat the process for the tie bar plate that goes onto the gate. Here's where the C-channel comes into play. Instead of screwing the bracket into wood, I wanted this part of the gate to be attached to metal. Before welding in the plate, I made sure to have the included clevis pin inserted through. Here I finish installing the rest of the kant-slam closer. I adjust the hydraulic cylinder and modify the closing speed of the gate. Mission success. Off camera, I primed and painted everything before the end of the day. Day 9 is all about getting the wood attached. As I set the first piece into place, I noticed that the C-channels are angled into the frame. I pulled out my persuasion tool and persuaded each channel into place several times. Since the boards are still fairly wet, I make sure to butt up each one as close as I can to another. This way, when each board dries, there will be about an 1/8 inch gap between each board. As I set each board into place, I make sure to tack them in with 1-inch brads to hold them until I can screw them in. With the wood complete, I then installed the deadbolt. Off camera, I drilled a 1-inch hole onto the vertical tube by first using a 1/4-inch pilot hole and then using a metal step bit. The last item for the day is to reinstall the kant-slam gate closer. I simply attach the cylinder spring assembly with the provided hinge bolts and nuts. After a couple of days of letting the wood dry, it's time to screw down each board. However, before I do, I use a 1-inch spacer at my laser level to mark each location for the screws. I then drive a 1-inch screw to finish up the job. Alright, here is the completed project. Wood is nice and sealed with Thompson Weather Seal. I have my 2 kant-slam gate closers over here. Let's take a look. There's a deadbolt, my latch up here, and on the back side we can see everything here. Got my nice vertical pieces, have my angled flat bar down there, nothing can get underneath. Take a look at the deadbolt over here, nice and smooth. And that is it. Once again, thank you to my buddy Taylor for helping me out with this project. And for you, thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you the next T Takes On.